Hi guys, hi girls, welcome to another episode of Fun with Modern C++. Today we'll be looking at comments. Now, comments are basically what you use to document your code inline. I mean, for example, looking at this code here, it seems kind of simple, straightforward. We've looked at this in the first episode of this series. So while we're at it, I would recommend that if this is your first time here, I would say go to the description. There's a link to the first episode and get started there so that you can catch up with what we've been talking about throughout this series so far. So this is a kind of a side mission. It's going to be a shorter video, and we're just looking at comments and how they're used, or why and how important they are. Now, in a simple piece of code like this, comments may not be important because it's kind of self-explanatory what this code does. But in C++, it's not uncommon to find programs and tools and utilities with hundreds of thousands of lines going into the millions of lines. And when you're working with big teams, you need to know what function does what, you need to know what code does what. And that's where comments come in. Now, basically, this little program here, as we did, would probably just print out hello world, and that's basically it. But what happens when I mean, there are cases where you need to document and leave messages aside, and that's when we come to something like this. Now, I had mentioned this earlier on a previous episode, but again here, you can see that there are a few types of comments that C++, the standard, you're able to use with the standard C++. Now, we have this C-style comment which spans over several lines, where it's just a slash and an asterisk, and then you close the comment with another star and an asterisk. So that's one comment. So it can take up a single line or it can take up multiple lines. Then you have the C++ style comment, which you have the double slash, and it takes only one line. So it doesn't have to, in this case here, it doesn't have to be starting at the beginning of the line. It can come after a bit of code, or you can have gaps. It really doesn't matter. But it's sometimes it's good to be consistent, and maybe this is a good way of commenting where you just have it on its own line, and then it can describe what comes below it. Now, there's one type of comment that is not part of the standard, but it's very important, and it's used by utilities and tools for additional documentation. And that is, for example, in IntelliSense, if you hover your mouse, you get some additional info about what you're hovering over. And that just doesn't come out of the blue. It is part of the comment system. So when you have a comment that is formatted in like so. This is compatible with Dioxygen, which is a commenting documentation tool that C++ uses. There are several others. And basically, I have a function here which says some function int A, int B, and then it just returns A and B, A plus B. You can have this format with slash double asterisk and then an asterisk on each line, and then you end with the asterisk single line. Now this basically, I'm commenting this function with a brief that says, briefly describes the function, and then at param A, at param B, this is the first number, the second number, and then at return, it's the sum of A and B. That basically describes what this function is for. This is also when working on big projects in multiple teams, having this type of comment before each function, each class, really helps bring out the code and lets your team understand basically what they're doing. You could add additional information here. I could say something like this is a function that does so many things and whatever you want. And then that can also have more information specifically for the user, not necessarily for some of these tools that do documentation and IntelliSense. So with that, guys, basically that's all I have to say. So these comments, as you can see, everything in green is totally ignored by the compiler. A comment, for example, a C-style comment, if I remove that, and then let's get rid of this, okay? Notice everything turns green because that comment is not closed. So this, everything now will be ignored by the compiler in C++. So, but the funny thing is when you include a file, for example, when you include a file like here we've included IOStream, if there is a C-style string that's not closed inside this file, it does not spill over and come into this file that includes it. And the reason why is comments are processed before preprocessor directives, which is, we'll be looking at that in our next topic. And we will also be talking about in another video, we'll be talking about the stages in which a compiler builds, passes your code and gets to compile it. What happens first and what happens the second stage, the third stage. So basically there is 8 or 9 stages that your code goes through before it's passed on to the compiler, which converts it into object code and the assembler, and then hands it over to the linker, which creates the final executable. Anyway, that's beyond the scope of this video. We'll be talking about that stuff and more interesting things as we come. So guys, have a good day and look out for our next video coming soon. Bye bye.